Alieu Fuad Nyei, former Assistant Minister for Expenditure at the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning in Liberia, led a reform of travel allowances policy in the public sector. The aim was to reduce the pressure that travel-related expenditures placed on the budget. He explains the process that led to the successful implementation of a reform that was deemed out of reach. His story showcases not a complex technical reform, but an institutional reform that required changes to the existing rules and practices.
Liberia, we had a problem of high expenditure, increasing expenditure in foreign travels. We would perennially be faced with this problem of ministries and agencies running down their foreign travel budgets and requesting the Ministry of Finance to provide resources for very important travels. There was real strain on the government's budget. And when you spend more money on foreign travel, what that basically means is that takes away vital resources that we needed to spend on education, in health, also to be able to do infrastructure projects. Those who actually benefit from the reform, from the current policy, are actually those who had to go and confront to get them to change the policy. Senior officials of government and other people who were making these trips saw the huge payouts that they got from travels abroad as additional incentive for the position that they occupy. There was also an element of productivity loss because staff that should be in offices doing work who had absolutely no need to be out of the country were out of the country, and staff who should actually be out of the country on specific programs didn't actually have that chance. So it was a real complex situation that we had to confront that had many various parts. I started tackling this problem when I was appointed as Assistant Minister for Expenditure. In order for us to be able to deal with this problem, we needed to get political support. My immediate boss is the Deputy Minister for Fiscal Affairs, a very competent man. So I initially engaged him. And we have an office in the Ministry of Finance known as the Reform Coordination Unit. That office basically coordinates every PFM reform in the country. So I engaged them, and everyone said that this is a very good idea. In fact, this is something that we can work on. But they were also extremely apprehensive about the likelihood of us making any progress on this. I realized that I needed to do a lot more of work. What we have to do now is to put these data together and be able to generate a story that tells in a compelling way what the objective of this is. So we did our initial work, and then we presented it first to the Deputy Minister. He was impressed about it. And so we also updated the Minister of Finance, and he also supported this idea. But because it's something that's so important, he asked for us to have a financial management team meeting, almost like a meeting of senior officials in the Ministry of Finance. So that meeting was called, and when we did the presentation, there was a lot of uproar in the room. And because obviously, and for obvious reason, most of the staff around the table are those that actually travel regularly also from the Ministry of Finance. We also raised the issue about how unsustainable, how high the payments we were making were. For example, a single trip of the president, in some cases, was costing us $150,000. We felt that that rate of expenditure was also extremely unsustainable. But most importantly, when we did a comparative analysis of what the government of Liberia was paying in DSA rates, in per diem rates to officials that were traveling abroad, it was almost twice the rates of, say, the IMF, the World Bank. And these are institutions that are also helping us, providing us support. So we had to make sure that we take action. And that particular point was a really important point to get the minister's support. And that support of the minister also further energized us in order to go ahead and do a lot more of the technical work that we did. I had to make sure that I get together individuals with the right skills that I needed to get this work done. I got someone from the IFMIS unit. The IFMIS is the Integrated Financial Management Information System, which is a repository of all of our financial transactions. So the individual I got from IFMIS basically had to run the system and get us all of the information on travel expenditure dating as far back as 2-3 years. Then I had to get someone from the reform coordination unit. That person was our own guardian in basically working with other bilaterals in other countries to get us the data we needed to do the comparative. I had to get someone from cash management unit. The cash management unit monitors the expenditure of the current budget. So with that person, we got all of the information we needed in order to ensure that we have quality information on what government expenditure was in terms of foreign travel. With that team, we had our inception meeting, and when we set out our work plan in terms of what we needed to do, what sort of data we needed, I had to basically reach out to them almost every day. And because we are all in the same ministry, it was easy reaching out to them, following up with them in terms of getting the data, and then allowing the entire team to go with me to the senior management team meeting to do the presentation. Because we were able to put the data together, to analyze them, to tell a story that was convincing to the minister. Each time we did these things, we were able to also build some level of commitment within the team and motivation. Because in many ways, team members now saw that their effort would actually lead to something very positive for the country. It was not just about reducing the rate. It was also about bringing in greater accountability in the way government per diem rates were. Unlike before, there would be a lump sum rate given to officials on travel abroad, and that covered hotel accommodation and per diem. We felt that that was the wrong approach. So we had to now, in new policy, break that up and then have an accommodation rate and a per diem rate. And we also were able to put a cap on the delegation size, unlike before where it was not uncommon to find a delegation from a particular ministry comprising of 7-8 officials going for a particular conference. We had to cap that down to a maximum of 3. So in cases where there is a need for extension of the delegation, that had to meet the rating approval of the Office of the Presidency. We also had restriction of the number of days for which government DSA would be paid. June of 2015, there was an approval that we got from the cabinet about the implementation of this particular policy beginning July of 2015. We felt that if this policy is to be implemented across the government, our test for its implementation would be for the president to make a trip and then using this policy. Unfortunately, there was a trip in July of 2015, and that particular, the adjusted rates were not used in July. And so that created some real setback for the policy. By December of 2015, obviously Ebola was calming down, but Ebola had also created a big void in the economy. And to also make things complex, Liberia's major export of iron ore, the global price for iron ore was also reducing. So as a result of that, the government's fiscal position was even getting worse. So that created another real urgent need for a relook at this policy. So there was also a further decision from the cabinet that apparently it was the wrong decision to have not started the implementation of that policy. So we were asked to further review the policy. So we did further reviews, and by July 1 of 2016, the revised travel policy was used by the president, and every other official on travel abroad have been using that policy since then. True to its objectives, in the first year of execution of this new policy, we were able to reduce travel costs down by 35%, and the number of trips have also gone down by over 30%. We've already shown that in order to reduce the cost of the recurrent budget, you don't do so by reducing the budget line. And that's the powerful message that comes out of this reform. You don't reduce budgets, you don't create fiscal space in recurrent budget by reducing budget lines. You do so by reforming policies. So there has been a lot of efforts in terms of looking at policy restrictions on other areas, in terms of vehicle maintenance, in terms of vehicle ownership, in terms of personnel, in terms of both fee payments from SOEs, in terms of communication allowances. So there has been a lot of other efforts in other areas. Challenging the status quo in our PFM system is uncommon. I feel so good about taking on really challenging tasks. That's why I'm in PFM. I want to do things, I want to contribute to things that are seen as so difficult by so many other people. When those of us in PFM in our respective countries recognize that problems that are seen as so much challenging are those problems that when solved will unlock a lot of potential for growth in our countries, for development in our countries, and for fiscal transparency and accountability. And that's exactly what I feel so, that is exactly why I feel so good about this particular reform. It is good to try, to push. Once you push harder, you may be able to succeed. But if you just sit back and say, oh, this is not going to happen, it is such mentality that continues to keep progress in PFM so low in many of our countries. The success of this reform has also inspired a lot of my colleagues who are working on reforms and also who are just working in the ministry. Because there are other people who think that there are certain things that you cannot change, regardless of your effort. Once it gets to the political authorities, it's going to get stuck. My personal reward has been the recognition that I have gotten from the Minister of Finance, and it has inspired me to never settle down for little tasks. I always want to be able to go out for the elephant in the room, the reform that all of the other reformers are afraid to encounter. I've never been comfortable with the status quo in my whole PFM journey, and I don't think I'm ever going to be comfortable with the status quo. Once there is a scope for change, once there is a little room for change, I think it is then the time that those who are real good reformers can now go in and work around expanding that little room to an apartment, to a building, and hopefully with the right coalition, you can be able to achieve a lot more.